Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku claimed the staff of creation. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain over the Kanto Wharf district was a miserable, persistent drizzle that did little to wash away the grime. It clung to the corrugated steel of warehouses, slicked the cracked asphalt with a sheen of oil and filth, and beaded on the reinforced fabric of Izuku Midoriya's hero costume. The air tasted of salt, rust, and ozone, a familiar cocktail for coastal raids. Eyes up, everyone! Shota Aizawa's voice crackled through their earpieces, a dry monotone that cut through the symphony of the downpour. Perimeter is established. The pros are making their primary push into Warehouse Gamma 7. Our objective remains support and containment. Ida, Uraraka, you're on civilian evac for the North Sector. Kirishima, Kaminari, you're with Rock Lock's team, reinforcing the Eastern Cordon. Todoroki, Yayorozu, you're with me on the West. Midoriya, you're with Fat Gum's unit. Your job is to intercept any runners trying to break south. No heroics, no solo plays. Subdue and contain. Is that clear? A chorus of "Yes, sir!" echoed back. Deku adjusted his footing on the slick roof of a smaller storage unit, the green lightning of One for All, full cowl crackling around him at a steady 15%. It was a low, controlled hum of power now, as familiar as his own heartbeat. Below, he could see the portly, sun-yellow form of Fat Gum directing his sidekicks, his cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the grim setting. Their target was a ghost, a cancerous remnant of a defeated organization. The shy Hasaikai, once a major player in the criminal underworld, had been shattered by their raid months ago. But cancer, Deku had learned, had a nasty habit of metastasizing. Small cells of loyalists, led by some of Chisaki's former lieutenants, had gone to ground, regrouping. Intelligence suggested they weren't trying to rebuild their empire of fear, but something stranger. They were hoarders, smugglers of the rare and esoteric, specifically pre-quirk artifacts. It was a bizarre new mission statement, one that had piqued the interest of the Hero Public Safety Commission. A sudden flare of blue flame from the direction of Gamma 7 painted the weeping sky, followed by the percussive boom of an explosion that vibrated through the soles of Deku's boots. The raid was fully underway. Looks like they're not going quietly. Fat Gum's voice boomed, audible even without the comms. Stay sharp, kid! These guys are rats, and rats know all the holes. Deku nodded, his eyes scanning the maze of shipping containers and shadowed alleyways below. His newest quirk, Danger Sense, was a low thrum at the back of his skull, a constant, generalized warning that was useless for specifics in a hot zone like this. It was like trying to hear a whisper in a rock concert. Still, he stretched it out, trying to feel for any sharp spikes, any pointed threats. For 10 minutes, the world was a cacophony of distant battle. He heard Kirishima's boisterous shouts, the sharp crackle of Kaminari's electricity, and the deep, earth-shaking impacts that could only be a pro-hero going all out. His own sector remained quiet. Too quiet. The rats were staying in their nest. Then a spike. It wasn't a roar of impending doom like the one he'd felt from Shigaraki. It was a sharp, needle-like prick in his mind, directed south-southwest. A runner. Fat Gum. Deku spoke into his comm, his voice calm and focused. I have a runner. Moving fast. Heading for the old cannery complex. On it! Don't let him get into the open water. Deku didn't need to be told twice. He pushed off the roof, the air rushing past him as he landed silently on the asphalt below. He channeled more of One for All into his legs, the world becoming a green-tinged blur as he accelerated. The needle prick of Danger Sense grew more intense, a frantic wasp buzzing against his temporal lobe. The runner was fast, and more than that, he was panicked. He rounded a stack of rusted red containers and caught his first glimpse of the target. A man in the traditional Hasaikai plague mask and dark suit, though his jacket was torn and one sleeve was stained dark with blood. The man's quirk was immediately apparent. Sharp, ivory-colored spurs of bone jutted from his knuckles and elbows, giving him a jagged, dangerous silhouette. Stop! You're cornered! Deku yelled, his voice amplified slightly by his mask's built-in calm. The villain threw a look over his shoulder, his eyes wide with animal terror behind the mask's lenses. He didn't reply, instead using his elbow spurs to slash through a chain-link fence as if it were tissue paper, and ducked into the oppressive darkness of a concrete structure. The cannery. He's entered the building, Deku reported, skidding to a halt before the fresh breach. The air that billowed out was stale, smelling of rot and brine. Danger sense was screaming now, a chaotic mess of general threat from the building itself and the sharp point of the villain he was pursuing. Aizawa's voice was a whipped crack in his ear. Midoriya, report. Do not pursue alone. I'm not, sir. I'm maintaining visual, Deku replied, his eyes already adjusting to the gloom. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The villain was gone, swallowed by the shadows, but letting him go, letting him burrow deeper into this warren, felt wrong. He was running from something inside the main raid, but he was also running to something. That's what his gut told him. He slipped through the fence. The inside of the cannery was a graveyard of industry. Hulking, silent machinery loomed like steel titans, draped in cobwebs thick as cotton. A thick layer of dust and grime coated every surface. His boots crunched on debris, broken glass, discarded bits of metal. The buzz of danger sense led him left, down a long corridor lined with what used to be administrative offices. Doors hung open, revealing ransacked rooms. It seemed this place hadn't been as abandoned as the city thought. A loud clang echoed from deeper within. Deku's muscles tensed, and he flowed into the darkness, a silent green phantom. The corridor ended at a heavy, reinforced steel door, the kind you'd see on a bank vault. It was ajar, a thick bar of light spilling from within. The source of the villain's panic, and his destination. Deku flattened himself against the wall, listening. Can't let them get it! The young master said it was the key! A panicked voice hissed from inside. The runner. A second voice, rougher and deeper, replied with a cough. The key to what? More of his mad dreams? We're finished, you fool. They've got us boxed in. No! This is different. This is power from the old world. Before all this, Deku frowned. Before all this? Before quirks? He risked a glance around the doorframe. The room was a stark concrete bunker, a stark contrast to the decaying factory around it. It was lined with shelves, but they didn't hold money or drugs. They held junk. Or what looked like junk. Old, tarnished silverware, faded tapestries, suits of medieval armor, even a collection of what looked like primitive firearms. It was a museum of the forgotten. In the center of the room, standing on a simple, unadorned concrete pedestal, was an object that defied the mundane nature of everything else. It was a staff, about 6 feet long, crafted from a metal that seemed to fall somewhere between gold and silver, an electromalloy that drank the harsh glare of the single overhead bulb. Intricate, spiraling inlays of a deep, celestial blue, lapis lazuli, Deku's analytical mind supplied, ran its length. There were no seams, no joints, no sign of forging or welding. It looked as if it had been grown rather than made. The head of the staff was a complex, crystalline structure, faceted like a diamond but glowing with a soft, internal azure light. And it was the source of the strangest sensation his danger sense had ever produced. It wasn't a spike of malice or a wave of impending harm. It was a hum. A deep, resonant thrum that wasn't a sound, but a feeling. It felt like standing next to a silent, sleeping leviathan, a presence of immense, neutral, potential energy. It was so overwhelming it almost drowned out the acute danger of the two villains in the room. The runner he chased was arguing with a larger, heavy-set man who was bleeding from a wound in his side. Between them, cowering near a pile of discarded crates, was a man in the grease-stained overalls of a dockworker, his face pale with terror. A civilian. Kenji, his name tag read. He must have been hiding here when the raid started. We have to use it, the runner insisted, gesturing wildly at the staff. No one knows how. The larger man coughed, spitting blood. Chisaki spent years trying. It's just a lump of metal. He was wrong. Just then, the runner's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Deku's barely visible form in the doorway. Hero! He shrieked. All pretense of stealth vanished. Deku burst into the room, one for all flaring. It's over! "Surrender and you'll get medical attention," he shouted, his gaze fixed on the injured man, then the terrified civilian. The larger villain slumped against the wall, defeated. But the runner was made of more desperate stuff. His eyes, crazed with fear and fanaticism, darted from Deku to the civilian, then to the staff. He saw his play. In a horrifyingly swift movement, he lunged not for a weapon, but for the civilian, Kenji, hauling him up by the front of his overalls and pressing the point of a bone spur against his throat. "Stay back!" the villain snarled, his voice trembling. "One more step and he dies!" Deku froze, his body thrumming with power he couldn't unleash. The room became a tableau of tension. The hum of the staff, the ragged breathing of the villain, the whimpers of the hostage. "Let him go," Deku said, his voice low and steady, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. "You can't escape. My team has the entire district locked down. Shut up!" The villain's eyes flicked to the staff again. A mad idea was blooming behind his mask. The old stories, they said it was a weapon for those with the will to command it. He was misinterpreting the legends, twisting them to fit his desperation. Before Deku could process the implication, the villain shoved the civilian away, sending him stumbling backward. Kenji tripped over a loose cable and fell hard, his head striking the concrete floor with a sickening crack. He lay still. For a split second, the villain was distracted by his own brutality. It was the opening Deku needed. He shot forward, black whip lashing out from his arm to ensnare the villain's legs. But he was too late for the villain's primary goal. Ignoring Deku, the man had spun around and snatched the staff from its pedestal. It was clearly heavier than he expected, and he grunted, adjusting his grip. He held it like a crude club, its otherworldly beauty utterly lost on him. "If I can't have it, no one will!" he screamed, his mind completely fractured. He raised the staff high over his head, not to swing at Deku, but to bring it crashing down on the unconscious civilian's skull. An act of pure, spiteful destruction. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Deku saw the trajectory of the swing. He saw Kenji, helpless on the floor. He saw the beautiful, ancient artifact about to be used as a bludgeon. He wouldn't make it in time to tackle the villain. Black Whip was already wrapping around his ankles, but it wouldn't stop the downward momentum of the swing. His mind, his very soul screamed. It wasn't a tactical thought. It was the raw, primal cry of a hero's spirit. "I need to protect them. I need a shield, a perfect one, right now." The thought wasn't vague. It was laser-focused, born from countless hours hunched over his notebooks. His mind, in that nanosecond of pure desperation, conjured a specific image. Page 114 of Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 28. A theoretical design for a full-body, rapid deployment riot shield. An interlocking array of hexagonal plates made of a carbon nanofiber weave, angled for maximum deflection, transparent for visibility. A perfect defense. He lunged, his free hand outstretched, not to grab the villain, but to intercept the staff itself. His gloved fingers closed around the cool, smooth metal just below the crystalline head. The world ended, and was reborn in blue-gold light. The moment his skin made contact, the humming presence he'd felt exploded into a deafening roar in his mind. It wasn't a physical sound. It was a psychic shockwave of pure, raw potentiality. It wasn't like the storm of One for All, a torrent of power rushing into him. This was the opposite. It was a siphon. A bottomless drain opening up at the core of his being. He felt his stamina, his physical energy, his mental focus, his very life force, being pulled out of him, funneled down his arm and into the staff. The staff itself became a star. It erupted in a blinding, silent nova of azure and gold light that bleached all color from the room. The single light bulb overhead popped, plunging the space into a maelstrom of divine radiance. The villain, his hand still on the lower part of the shaft, screamed as the energy surged, but he couldn't let go. Deku held on, his desperate thoughts still echoing in his mind. A perfect shield, and the staff answered. From the point of impact where Deku's hand met the staff, threads of pure light began to weave themselves into existence. They spun out into the air, crossing and knitting together with impossible speed and precision. Blue and gold strands of hard light formed hexagonal frames, which were then filled with a shimmering, translucent energy. It was happening exactly as he had pictured it, exactly as he had sketched it. The interlocking buckler design from his notebook was being born from nothing. In less than a heart-stopping second, it was complete. A wall of shimmering, hexagonal plates, 5 feet high and 8 feet wide, materialized in the space between the falling staff and the prone form of Kenji. It was beautiful, ethereal, and looked as fragile as a stained glass window. The villain's swing, fueled by adrenaline and madness, continued its arc. The heavy electrum staff, an artifact of impossible density, met the shield. There was no clang of metal on metal. There was no shattering impact. There was a single, resonant chime. A pure, harmonic note that hung in the air like a cathedral bell. The staff stopped dead, its kinetic energy completely and utterly negated. The villain's arms shuddered from the shock, the bones in his wrists fracturing with audible snaps. The shield didn't even vibrate. It was as immovable as a mountain. The villain, his face a mask of disbelief and agony, was thrown backward by the sheer reactive force, his grip finally torn from the staff. He landed in a heap, tangled in the now constricting tendrils of Black Whip. The blinding light receded, drawn back into the staff as if inhaled. The silence that fell was absolute, profound. Deku stood panting, his arms still outstretched, his hands still gripping the staff. Before him, the impossible shield remained, shimmering with a soft inner light. On the other side of it, the villain was trapped, groaning in pain. To his side, Kenji the dockworker was safe, untouched. Then, the cost came due. A wave of exhaustion unlike anything he had ever known crashed over him. It wasn't the searing pain of a broken bone from a 100% smash. It wasn't the muscle fatigue of maintaining full cow for too long. This was a hollow, soul-deep weariness. It felt as if he had been drained of blood, water, and spirit all at once. His vision swam, black spots dancing in his eyes. The green lightning of one for all sputtered and died, his body no longer having the energy to sustain it. His knees buckled. He staggered, using the staff as a crutch to keep from collapsing entirely. It felt warm in his hand now. A pleasant, thrumming warmth that was quickly fading. As he watched, the beautiful, perfect shield in front of him dissolved. It didn't break or vanish. It unraveled, the threads of light unwinding and flowing back into the air, vanishing into nothingness until all that was left was the lingering smell of ozone and the deep, ringing silence. The vault door crashed open. "Midoriya!" Aizawa's voice. He stormed in, his capture weapon swirling around him, his eyes glowing a menacing red. He was followed by the imposing forms of Rock Lock and Fat Gum, their expressions grim. They took in the scene in an instant, the groaning, bone-broken villain tangled in Black Whip, the second villain slumped against the wall, the unconscious civilian on the floor, and Deku, pale as a sheet, swaying on his feet, leaning on a bizarre golden staff. "Report," Aizawa demanded, his gaze sharp and analytical, flicking from Deku to the staff and back again. "Villain secured," Deku managed to gasp, his voice raspy. "Civilian, injured but safe. He needs—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The world was tilting on its axis. Fat Gum was already at the civilian's side, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse and breathing. "He's alive! Head wound looks nasty, but he's stable. Kid, what the hell happened in here?" We felt a tremor, and the lights blew out across the whole block. Rock Lock was cuffing the conscious villain, his face a mask of suspicion. "And what?" he said, his voice low as he looked at the staff in Deku's hand. "Is that thing?" Deku opened his mouth to answer, to try and explain the impossible sequence of events. The desperate thought, the siphon of energy, the shield made of light. The words wouldn't form. All he could manage was a weak shake of his head. The staff in his hand, which had felt so alive just moments before, now felt like nothing more than what the injured villain had called it, a lump of metal. It was cool to the touch again, its internal light extinguished. It was just an ornate, ancient object, beautiful but inert. If not for the memory of its blinding light, and the bone-deep exhaustion racking his body, he might have believed he'd imagined the whole thing. I don't know," he finally whispered. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. He was a man who hated variables, who despised the unknown. And the boy who was already a living, breathing anomaly of power was now holding the biggest unknown he had ever seen. He saw the state Deku was in, the pallor, the sheen of cold sweat, the tremor in his hands. It was the look of a quirk user who had pushed themselves far, far past their limit. But the energy Aizawa had felt for a split second through the wall, a wave of pressure that had made the hair on his arms stand up, was no quirk he had ever encountered. "Fat Gum, get the civilian to the medics," Aizawa ordered, his voice tight. "Rock lock, secure both perpetrators and this entire room. Nothing goes in or out. I'm taking Midoriya." He stepped forward and gently but firmly took Deku's arm, pulling him away from the staff. Deku's grip was reluctant to release, his fingers tingling with a phantom warmth. As Aizawa guided him out of the vault, Deku looked back over his shoulder. 2 other pro-heroes were entering, their faces etched with confusion as they stared at the bizarre collection of artifacts. One of them cautiously approached the pedestal where the staff had rested, running a gloved hand over its empty surface. But Deku's eyes were fixed on the staff itself, now leaning against the shelf where Rocklock had placed it. In the dim, restored emergency lighting of the corridor, it looked like a museum piece once more. Harmless. Ancient. Silent. Yet, as he was led away into the drizzling rain, Deku could still feel it. A faint, lingering echo of the hum at the back of his mind. The memory of a bottomless drain and a blinding light. The impossible sensation of his own desperate will being forged into reality. He had touched a power that was not one for all. A power that didn't break his bones but instead drank his spirit. A power that had answered his plea to save someone by creating a perfect, impossible defense out of thin air. He stumbled, leaning heavily on Aizawa, his mind a whirlwind of questions with no answers. The weight of his exhaustion was immense, but beneath it, a new, heavier burden was beginning to settle in his soul. What had he done? And what, in the name of all the heroes he'd ever admired, had he just found? The night was far from over. The infirmary was quiet, the only sounds the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor and the gentle hum of medical equipment. Izuku Midoriya was propped up on a bed, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders despite the room's warmth. Recovery Girl had fussed over him, her quirk planting a chaste kiss on his forehead that had mended the cellular exhaustion but left behind a profound, bone-deep weariness. He felt hollowed out, like a drum that had been beaten until its skin split. The door swished open, admitting 3 figures who carried with them the gravity of the situation. Principal Nizu, perched atop the broad shoulder of All Might's skeletal form, looked as inscrutable as ever, his beady black eyes holding an unnerving intelligence. All Might himself looked haggard, his sunken eyes filled with a worry that went beyond mere concern for a student's health. Behind them, Shota Aizawa stood with his arms crossed, his expression a stony mask of pragmatism. "Young Midoriya," All Might began, his voice a low rumble. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Izuku admitted, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. "But I'm okay." "Really?" Nizu hopped down from All Might's shoulder onto the small table beside the bed, his tiny paws clasped behind his back. "A concise and accurate assessment," the principal chirped, his tone belying the seriousness of the topic. "Your physical stamina was depleted to a level we typically only see in marathon runners after a 48-hour ultra event. Your metabolic rate had spiked to nearly 400% of its baseline. Whatever happened in that vault, Midoriya, it did not just tire you. It very nearly consumed you." Izuku flinched, the clinical description making the event feel even more terrifying in retrospect. He looked at his hands, half expecting to see them fading away. "The staff, it felt like it was drinking from me. We've been running preliminary analyses on the artifact." Aizawa cut in, his gaze sharp and direct. "Power Loader's team has scanned it with every device we have at UA. Spectrometry, radiography, geological resonance imaging, you name it. The results are, to put it mildly, frustrating." Nizu picked up the thread. "The main shaft is composed of an electromalloy, yes, but one with a crystalline lattice structure that should be impossible to form under natural conditions. The blue inlays are not lapis lazuli. Their composition is entirely unknown to our databases. More importantly, it registers as nothing more than an inert piece of metal. It has no power source. It emits no radiation. It has no discernible technology. By all scientific measures, it is simply a very old, very ornate, and very well-made stick. But it's not. Izuku whispered, the memory of the blinding light and the perfect shield still seared into his mind's eye. No! All Might agreed, his voice heavy. It is not! He pulled a chair over, the legs scraping softly against the linoleum, and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The posture was achingly paternal. My boy, when I passed one for all to you, I gave you a great burden, a power that had to be earned, a sacred torch that demanded you build a body and a spirit strong enough to hold it. You broke yourself time and again, molding your vessel through sheer will and agonizing effort. You earned it. His gaze fell to Izuku's hands, the scarred and gnarled trophies of his struggle. This staff, it feels different. The legends the Hoseikai were chasing, the few fragmented texts the Commission has found, they speak of a maker's wand or the forge of Ambrosius. They are myths, of course, from an age before quirks, before history was recorded with any reliability. But they all speak of a power that bypasses effort. A shortcut to creation. And I worry, Izuku. He finally met Izuku's eyes, and the raw vulnerability there made Izuku's chest ache. I worry what such a power that is not earned through sweat and spirit, could do to a heart as earnest as yours. Power that comes too easily can become a poison. It can warp a person's soul, making them forget the value of struggle, of empathy, of the very things that make a hero truly heroic. I fear it could make you lose sight of the man you are fighting so hard to become. The weight of All Might's words pressed down on him, heavier than any physical exhaustion. He saw the path his mentor was afraid of, a path where he relied on the staff, where he stopped pushing himself, where the green lightning of One for All gave way to the easy, seductive blue light of the artifact. A path where he became a god of convenience, not a hero of conviction. I understand, Izuku stammered. Understanding is not the issue, Aizawa said, his voice cutting through the emotional haze. The issue is a practical one. We have an object of unimaginable power, an object that a student, my student, can apparently operate. The Hoseikai knew about it. Who knows who else does? We can't lock it in a box and pretend it doesn't exist. That's not logical. We have to understand it. Its rules, its limits, its cost. For your safety, Midoriya, and for the safety of everyone else. Niza clapped his paws together, a sharp, decisive sound. Aizawa is correct. Ignorance, in this case, is not bliss, it is a catastrophic liability, which is why, once you are cleared by Recovery Girl, we will be proceeding to the development studio. We are going to conduct a controlled experiment. A shiver of something that was equal parts dread and undeniable curiosity ran down Izuku's spine. With the staff? With the staff, Niza confirmed, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of an unsolvable puzzle. We will discover its secrets together. And we will have the best possible support. Power Loader will oversee the safety protocols, and we will have a mind uniquely suited to this brand of chaotic creation assisting us. Izuku didn't even have to ask. There was only one person at UA who fit that description, Mei Hatsum. The Gamma-level development studio was less a workshop and more the sanctified temple of a mad goddess of invention. It smelled of ozone, hot metal, and high-grade machine oil. Blueprints and schematics were plastered over every available surface, interspersed with scorch marks and half-finished babies that ranged from rocket-powered boots to what looked suspiciously like a deployable capture foam cannon. In the center of the controlled chaos, a space had been cleared. A large, thick platform of reinforced polymer was marked with a yellow circle. Mei Hatsum, her pink dreadlocks tied back and her custom goggles pushed up on her forehead, was practically vibrating with excitement. Her golden, zoom lens eyes were fixed on the staff, which rested on a diagnostic cradle. Power Loader stood beside her, his expression one of weary resignation, a fire extinguisher held at the ready. Its molecular density is off the charts. Mei was gushing, gesturing wildly. And the energy signature it gave off during the incident, we have the readings from the campus grid. It wasn't an electrical surge or a kinetic event. It was a localized reality distortion, a metaphysical power output. Do you know what we can do with that? My babies could have integrated anti-gravity plating. Self-replicating armor. The possibilities are, Hatsum. Power Loader grunted. Let's try not to break the space-time continuum on the first go, alright? Izuku walked onto the platform, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. All Might and Aizawa watched from a reinforced observation booth, their faces tense. Nizu was perched on a console next to Power Loader, watching the data feeds. "All right, Midoriya," Power Loader said, his tone all business. "Here's the procedure. You will stand in the center of the platform. You will hold the staff. We're going to start simple. Principal Nizu has a theory about the activation trigger." Izuku's hands were clammy as he stepped forward and wrapped his fingers around the staff. It was cool and inert, giving no hint of the cosmic power it had unleashed hours before. It felt heavier now, weighted by the knowledge of what it was. "Midoriya," Nizu's voice came over the intercom. "In the vault, you were under extreme duress. Your desire to protect the civilian was a single, desperate, and highly specific thought. Let's test that hypothesis. I want you to try and create something, but keep the thought vague. Hold the staff and think, I want a ball." Izuku took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused. "I want a ball. A ball. Just a ball." He poured his will into the thought, pushing it at the staff. Nothing happened. The staff remained cold. The air remained still. He felt foolish. "Nothing," he said, opening his eyes. "I don't feel anything." May let out a frustrated groan. "Of course not. A ball isn't a blueprint, it's a suggestion. What kind of ball? A tennis ball? A bowling ball? A wrecking ball? What's its mass? Its composition? Its coefficient of friction? Power needs data. Give it data," Aizawa's voice crackled from the booth. "She has a point. Your thought in the vault was specific. A shield you had already designed. An excellent point, Miss Hatsum," Nizu chirped. "Let's refine the parameters. Midoriya, think of a specific object. Something you know intimately. Every detail. Every flaw." Izuku's mind raced. An object he knew perfectly? His eyes widened. Of course. He closed his eyes again, and this time, he pictured the All Might mug in his dorm room. Not a generic mug, but his mug, the one he'd had since he was 6. He pictured the heroic, smiling face of All Might in his Silver Age costume, the slight fading of the blue from 1,000 washes. He pictured the precise curve of the handle, the way his fingers fit around it. He pictured the tiny, hairline chip on the rim near the top, a casualty of a clumsy morning years ago. He pictured its weight, its ceramic texture, its very essence. My All Might mug. A flicker. The staff in his hands pulsed with a brief, gentle warmth. In the air before him, a faint shimmer of blue light appeared, a hazy, translucent outline of the mug. It wavered like a heat haze, unstable and incomplete, before fizzling out into nothing. Izuku gasped and staggered back a step. A dizzy spell washed over him, and he felt a familiar though much weaker sense of being drained. "Whoa!" May yelped, her goggles snapping down over her eyes. "Energy signature detected! It was weak, but it was there. It was trying, but it failed," Aizawa noted. "Why? The blueprint was incomplete," Power Loader murmured, staring at his console. "Midoriya's energy output spiked, but the materialization matrix was unstable. He knows what it looks like, but he doesn't know what it's made of. He doesn't have the chemical composition of the ceramic, or the specific pigments in the paint." A light bulb went off over May's head, so bright it was almost visible. "He needs a real schematic. Not just a memory." She darted over to a workbench cluttered with tools and snatched up a heavy, steel object. She shoved it into Izuku's face, her expression one of manic glee. "Forget your mug. Look at this. Standard issue 12mm chrome vanadium combination wrench. 15-degree offset on the box end for knuckle clearance. Precisely machined jaw with a maximum tolerance of 0.05 millimeters. This isn't a memory, Deku, it's a fact. A solid, tangible, reproducible fact. Visualize this." Her intensity was overwhelming, but her logic was undeniable. Izuku looked at the wrench, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive. He wasn't just looking at it, he was seeing it. The way the light glinted off the polished chrome. The stamped 12 on its side. the faint machining marks from its creation. He was Izuku Midoriya. His notebooks were filled with obsessive dissections of support gear, hero costumes, and quirk mechanics. This was his language. He held the staff, took a deep breath, and focused on the wrench. He pictured the atomic structure of the steel alloy, the forging process that gave it its strength. The precise angles and measurements May had barked at him. A perfect replica of this wrench. This time, the effect was immediate. The staff surged with warmth, a powerful current of energy flowing from Izuku's core, down his arm, and into the artifact. It wasn't a painful drain, more like opening a tap. He could feel his stamina being drawn out as fuel. Blue and gold light bled from the staff's crystalline head. It didn't explode outwards, it wove itself. Threads of light, thin as a spider's silk, spun into the air, creating a wireframe of the wrench. It was a ghostly, three-dimensional blueprint humming with energy. Then, the spaces within the frame began to fill, solidifying from light into matter. In the space of 3 seconds, a wrench, identical in every way to the one May was holding, coalesced from nothing and clattered onto the polymer platform. Izuku gasped, the flow of energy ceasing. He was breathing heavily, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. The effort felt equivalent to a sustained 20% full call dash for a full minute. For a single, simple tool, Power Loader cautiously approached, nudging the created wrench with his boot before picking it up with a pair of tongs. He compared it to the original. Identical, he breathed, his voice filled with disbelief. Wait, dimensions, finish, it's perfect. In the observation booth, All Might had a hand over his mouth, his eyes wide. Aizawa was stone-faced, but his grip on the railing had tightened. Rule number 1 established, Nizu announced, his voice unnervingly calm. The staff of creation requires a perfect blueprint. The more detailed the user's understanding of the object's composition and structure, the more successful the creation. He made a note on a date pad. Now, for the second discovery. Midoriya, your vitals? He's tired, Izuku panted. It took a lot out of me. Your heart rate is at 130 beats per minute, and your caloric consumption for that 3-second interval was approximately 200 calories. Nizu recited. Rule number 2, creation has a direct, quantifiable biological cost. The user's own stamina is the fuel. May's mind was already racing past the implications. Complexity must be a factor. A wrench is simple. What about something with moving parts? A gear assembly? Or a piston? Or my jetpack? Let's stick to a gear, Power Loader said dryly, pulling up a simple schematic on a nearby monitor. It was a standard 24-tooth spur gear. Try this, Midoriya. Focus on the blueprint, Izuku nodded, catching his breath. He looked at the schematic, absorbing the data, the pitch diameter, the pressure angle, the bore size. He lifted the staff again and focused. 124-tooth spur gear, as per the schematic. The drain was slightly stronger this time. The light spun, the wireframe formed, the matter coalesced. A perfect, dark gray steel gear fell to the platform with a solid clunk. But as it did, something else happened. The wrench in Power Loader's tongs dissolved. It didn't break or fall apart. It reverted to its base components of light, unraveling in a silent, beautiful cascade of blue and gold particles that faded into nothingness. Everyone stared. It's gone, May whispered, her voice filled with awe. The previous creation vanished the moment the new one was completed. Aizawa's voice observed from the booth. You can only have one at a time. Rule number 3, Nizu declared, a note of triumph in his voice. The staff can only sustain a single creation at any given moment. A fascinating limitation. It prevents mass production. It makes the choice of what to create a tactical, all-or-nothing decision. The gear on the floor then dissolved as well, as if to punctuate the point. Izuku hadn't consciously unmade it, but his focus had lapsed. It seemed concentration was required not just for creation, but for maintenance. He slumped, the staff's tip resting on the platform. The discoveries were monumental, but the cost was becoming terrifyingly clear. To create something truly complex, something life-saving like the shield, the stamina drain would be astronomical. He might not survive it. But then May Hatsum looked at him. Her zoom lens eyes were narrowed, not with frustration, but with a sudden, dawning, terrifying comprehension. She looked from the datapad with its complex schematics, to the inert staff, and then to Izuku. Her gaze was so intense it felt like she was scanning his DNA. "It's you!" she breathed, the words barely a whisper. "What are you talking about, Hatsum?" Power Loader asked. She ignored him, taking a step toward Izuku, her eyes wide. "All this time, we've been looking at the staff. We thought it was the key. But it's not. It's a lock. It's a tool. It needs a user, but not just any user." She pointed a greasy finger at him. "It needs an obsessive, detail-oriented, analytical freak with a brain that works like a supercomputer and a photographic memory for mechanics. It needs someone who doesn't just see a hero's costume, but sees the specific tensile strength of its composite fibers. It needs someone who doesn't just see a punch, but calculates the physics behind it." Her voice grew louder, filled with a manic reverence. "Your freaky notebooks, your stupid, non-stop mumbling, you spend every waking second analyzing everything around you. You've been building a mental library of blueprints your entire life. That's why you could make that shield. It wasn't just a wish, it was a design you had already perfected in your head. The staff isn't the miracle, Deku." She grinned, a wide, terrifying, brilliant smile. "You are. You're the perfect user." The room was silent. Izuku stared at her, his heart pounding. Everything she said was true. His lifelong habit, the thing he'd been mocked for, the core of his nerdy, heroic obsession, it wasn't a weakness, it was the key. For this power, it was everything. All Might's face in the booth was a mask of profound conflict. He saw it too. He saw that the very core of Izuku's spirit, his analytical and empathetic nature, was what made this dangerous power viable for him. It was a terrible, perfect irony. Let's test that," Izuku said, his voice trembling but firm. He felt a surge of resolve. If this was true, he needed to know. He needed to control it. "Something complex, something I know better than anyone." May's grin widened. She dashed to a console and with a flurry of keystrokes, pulled up a detailed, 3D schematic. It rotated on the main screen, a complex assembly of pressure chambers, microcompressors, and kinetic amplification nodes. "My babies!" she cheered. "Your Air Force gloves, Mark III. You helped me with the final pressure calibrations. You know the design is solid." Izuku stared at the blueprint. She was right. He knew every screw, every gasket, every line of code in the pressure sensor's firmware. He had spent weeks with May, refining the design. This was the ultimate test. He stood straight, gripping the staff with both hands now. He planted its base on the platform. "Everyone stand back," he said, his voice gaining a new authority. He closed his eyes and let the world fall away. He wasn't in the lab anymore. He was inside the blueprint. He saw the polymer casing, the internal lattice of shock-absorbent gel. He saw the main compression chamber, visualizing the way air would be drawn in and pressurized. He saw the delicate wiring connecting the firing stud to the release valve. He built it, piece by piece, in the workshop of his mind. Then, he opened his spiritual tap. He didn't just let the staff draw from him. He pushed his energy into it, feeding it the raw fuel of his stamina, letting a tiny, controlled spark of one for all's immense power act as an ignition source. The drain was immense. It was a physical punch to the gut, stealing the air from his lungs. His vision began to tunnel, the sounds of the lab fading into a dull roar. The staff became a conduit for a roaring river of his own life force, and it blazed. The light that erupted was not a flicker or a shimmer. It was a controlled, focused torrent. A miniature sun of blue-gold energy formed at the staff's head. The light didn't just weave, it machined. It printed itself into existence with impossible precision. Izuku could feel the creation taking shape, feel the staff translating his mental blueprint into physical reality. He felt the weight of the gloves manifesting, the pressure of their existence pulling on his soul. It felt like an eternity, but it was over in 10 seconds. The light vanished. Izuku's knees gave out, and he collapsed onto one knee, gasping, sweat stinging his eyes. The staff clattered from his numb fingers. He was utterly, completely spent. It was 100 times worse than the wrench, but there on the platform, solid and real, were his Air Force gloves. Not a shimmering copy. Not a ghostly image. They were perfect, down to the non-slip texture on the palms. Power Loader slowly approached and knelt, running a gloved hand over them. He looked up at Izuku, his expression one of pure, unadulterated shock. They're real. They're perfect. All Might was out of the booth in a flash, rushing to Izuku's side, helping him to his feet. My boy! Are you alright? Izuku! Izuku could only nod, leaning heavily on his mentor. He looked at the gloves, the product of his mind and this terrifying, wondrous power. He had done it. He had controlled it. Later, after another visit from Recovery Girl and a stern lecture about moderation, Izuku sat in a quiet observation room. The staff was before him, sealed inside a thick, transparent cryopolymer case, bathed in the soft glow of the room's lights. It was just a stick again, silent and waiting. He pressed his hand against the cool surface of the case, his gaze fixed on the intricate blue spirals. May was right. He was the perfect user. His obsession, his analysis, his endless mumbling and note-taking, it had all been training. He held the key to a lock that could build the world anew. He could create flawless medical equipment to save lives. He could create unbreakable shelters to protect people from disaster. He could create capture devices so perfect that no villain could escape and no one would ever get hurt. He could create anything. He could be the perfect hero. But as he stared at the staff, he felt the ghost of the energy drain, the memory of that soul-deep emptiness. He remembered All Might's warning, the fear of a power not earned. The price for every miracle was a piece of himself. The gloves on the table were a symbol of his potential, but also a receipt for the vitality he had spent. He looked at the reflection of his own face in the case's surface, and for the first time, he truly understood. It was a face filled with a dizzying, terrifying awe at the power he now commanded, and a deep, primal terror at the price it would inevitably exact. The burden of One for All was to become strong enough. The burden of the staff of creation was to remain human enough to wield it. The city of Muzurifu was screaming. It was a sound Izuku Midoriya was becoming all too familiar with. The high-pitched wail of sirens, the roar of collapsing infrastructure, and the underlying chorus of human panic. 3 days after the discovery of the staff of creation, the world had, with terrifying punctuality, provided a canvas for its power. The villain had called himself Tectonic. His quirk, a devastating form of geokinesis, allowed him to liquefy the foundational soil beneath structures, turning solid ground into a treacherous, churning soup. He targeted the newly constructed Daikoku Tower, a marvel of modern architecture and a symbol of the city's prosperity. Now it was a tomb. The lower 10 floors had pancaked, and the upper 40 were leaning at a precarious, impossible angle, held up by little more than strained rebar and desperate hope. Class 1A was on site, but they were relegated to the periphery. Their work-study licenses didn't cover a disaster of this magnitude. They were a glorified crowd control unit, forming a human chain with police officers to keep the growing throng of panicked onlookers and frantic family members from rushing the unstable collapse zone. From his position, Izuku could see the heart of the crisis. The rescue effort was grinding to a halt. At the epicenter of the collapse, a huge, V-shaped section of the tower, a concrete and steel leviathan weighing thousands of tons, had wedged itself over what used to be the building's subterranean shopping arcade. And beneath it, there were survivors. We have confirmed 9 life signs. Repeat, 9! A hero's voice, tight with stress, crackled over the shared emergency comms channel. They're in a structurally sound pocket of the sublevel concourse, but the debris above them is shifting. We're getting microfractures all along the primary stress point. The whole thing is going to come down. Izuku's eyes were fixed on the scene. He could see 2 of the top 10 heroes struggling, their immense power rendered tragically impotent. The dragon hero, Ryukyu, in her massive draconic form, was a beast of immense strength, but her sheer weight was the problem. If she tried to lift, or even nudge the debris, her mass would destabilize the fragile ground further, guaranteeing a full collapse. She could only hover uselessly, her powerful form a grim monument to the limits of strength. Nearby, Gang Orca was using his hypervibrations, not as a weapon, but as a form of sonar, his head cocked as he mapped the pocket of survivors and the shifting rubble with agonizing precision. It's a house of cards, he growled, his voice a low bass that rumbled through the comms. Every support beam is compromised. Try to lift one piece, and the load distribution will cascade. It's balanced on a knife's edge. Izuku's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. He could feel the familiar thrum of one for all wanting to be unleashed. He could get in there. He could use Black Whip to grab loose pieces, use a 45% smash to obliterate a non-critical section, and create an escape route. His mind, the analytical engine Mayhatsum had praised, was already running the calculations, the trajectories, the force distribution models. And every single one came back with the same answer: failure. The mass was too great. The structure too unstable. Any application of brute force, no matter how precisely applied, would be the final domino. They needed to support the entire mass at once, a feat that was physically impossible. Uraraka-san, please keep the line tight, Ida's voice commanded, chopping the air with his hand as he directed a frantic man trying to break the cordon. I'm trying, Ida-kun. Achiko Uraraka replied, her face grim as she gently but firmly held the man back. My parents, my kids are in there. The man sobbed, his words tearing at Izuku's heart. He saw the faces of his friends, Ida's frantic but rigid adherence to duty, Uraraka's compassionate eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. He saw the faces of the pros, etched with the unique agony of being powerless to help. And he thought of the staff. It wasn't with him. After the experiment, Principal Niza had it secured in a location so secret that Izuku himself didn't know it. But Nizu, ever the strategist, had given him something else. A briefcase, heavy and reinforced, handcuffed to his left wrist. Inside, nestled in high-density foam, was the Staff of Creation. It is a tool of last resort, Midoriya-kun. Niza's voice echoed in his memory. You are not to use it. You are its guardian. Your presence here is 99% a drill to see how you handle its protection in a crisis. Only if all other options are exhausted, and a direct order is given by myself or All Might, are you to even consider opening this case. There had been no order. All Might's warnings about unearned power, about the poison of easy solutions, rang like a klaxon in his soul. This was the exact trap his mentor had feared, a situation where his own earned power was not enough, and the temptation of the shortcut was overwhelming. A sharp, metallic groan cut through the air, a sound of tortured steel. A plume of dust erupted from the V-shaped rubble. It's shifting! Gang Orca yelled. The southern load-bearing pillar just sheared. We have maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less. 9 lives. Children among them. Their faces, unseen, flashed in Izuku's mind. He thought of Eri of Koda. He thought of the desperate, pleading eyes of the man being held back by Uraraka. 5 minutes. His earned power was not enough. His sweat, his blood, his broken bones, they had forged a hero, but they had not forged a miracle worker. And a miracle was what this situation demanded. He looked down at the briefcase. The choice was never really a choice at all. What was the point of a hero's soul if he let people die when he had the means to save them? The poison of an easy solution was a lesser evil than the poison of inaction. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku said into his comm, his voice shockingly calm. Requesting permission to approach the primary collapse zone. I have a solution. There was a pause. He could imagine his teacher's expression. Midoriya, what are you talking about? It's Project Atlas Cradle, sir. From the portfolio. It's a viable option. A longer pause. Aizawa knew about the portfolio. Niza had insisted the supervising teachers be briefed on the theoretical applications they were developing. It was a list of impossible, theoretical rescue devices that could only be built by the staff. That's not a hero maneuver, Midoriya. Aizawa's voice was low, almost a warning. That's a Hail Mary with a power we don't understand. It's the only option we have. Izuku replied, his gaze locked on the groaning pile of rubble. The line was silent for a full 10 seconds. Izuku could feel the weight of his teacher's deliberation. Finally, the static crackled. Niza has given pre-authorization. The call is yours, Midoriya, but you need to understand, if this goes wrong, the consequences are on you. Entirely. Understood, Izuku said, the word tasting like ash. He unclipped the handcuff with the key from his utility belt. He turned to Ida and Uraraka. Cover for me. I need to get closer. Their eyes widened. Deku-kun, what are you going to do? Uraraka asked, her voice trembling. He gave them a tight, pained smile. Something I have to. He didn't wait for a reply. He activated One for All, Full Kel, the familiar green lightning, a comforting embrace. Holding the heavy briefcase, he sprinted, weaving through the chaos of rescue vehicles and frantic personnel. He didn't go to the front, where Ryukyu and Gang Orca were. He went to the side, finding a small, relatively stable rooftop that gave him a clear, unobstructed view of the entire V-shaped mass of debris. He set the briefcase down and opened it. The staff of creation lay inert, its electrum surface and blue inlays seeming to absorb the gray light of the sky. It looked mundane, ancient. He took a deep breath and lifted it. It felt cool, solid, and heavy with potential. From a pouch on his belt, he removed a datapad. Its screen glowed to life, displaying a highly complex, three-dimensional schematic. It was labeled Project Atlas Cradle. It was something he and May had spent the last 2 days working on, fueled by coffee and Nise's terrifying enthusiasm. It wasn't just one design, it was a modular, adaptive algorithm. The program was linked to his hero suit's sensor suite, which was now actively scanning the rubble, feeding real-time data on mass, stress points, and structural composition directly into the schematic. The blueprint was adjusting itself live, designing the perfect support structure for this specific, unique disaster. This was the genius of May's contribution. He didn't have to visualize every single nut and bolt. He had to understand the system, the principles, the intent of the design, and feed it the raw data. The datapad was the bridge. He looked at the shifting numbers, the spiderweb of blue lines on the screen that represented the cradle. It was an intricate web of interlocking beams, hydrostatic pistons, and load-distributing girders, all designed to materialize within the gaps of the rubble, conforming to its every contour, catching every piece simultaneously before distributing the immense weight outward to stable ground. It was a work of art. A piece of celestial architecture, and the estimated stamina cost displayed at the bottom of the screen was apocalyptic. Midoriya, we're down to 2 minutes! Gang Orca's voice barked in his ear. This was it. Izuka planted the base of the staff on the rooftop. He gripped it with both hands, channeling the memory of the lab, of how it felt to push his energy into the artifact. He closed his eyes, his mind merging with the schematic on the datapad. He wasn't just looking at a blueprint, he was becoming it. He felt the angles of the support beams, the pressure tolerances of the pistons, the flow of force through the entire impossible structure. He took one last, shuddering breath, and then he opened the floodgates. The sensation was not a drain. It was an amputation. He felt his life force, his core stamina, being ripped out of him in a torrent. It was a physical violation, a spiritual exsanguination. The green lightning of One for All flickered violently, and he poured a sliver of its fire into the stream, using it as an accelerant, a catalyst to ignite the greater reaction. The staff answered his sacrifice. It did not glow, it ignited. A pillar of pure, solid blue-gold light erupted from the crystalline head, shooting straight up into the weeping gray sky like a reverse thunderbolt. It was utterly silent, yet the pressure wave it emitted made the air thick and heavy, silencing the sirens, the shouts, the very city itself. Everyone, heroes, civilians, his friends, froze, their faces upturned, bathed in the unholy light. From the pillar of light, a million glittering threads began to pour downwards, not falling, but flowing with purpose, like a river of liquid stars. They converged on the V-shaped pile of death. Izuka was on his knees now, the staff the only thing holding him up. His vision was a pinprick of light surrounded by a universe of black. The sounds of the world were gone, replaced by the roaring in his own ears, the sound of his body screaming as it was unmade to fuel his creation. He held on, his mind locked onto the blueprint. His will the only thing guiding the storm. The threads of light reached the rubble. They did not touch it. They wove through it, passing through solid concrete and steel as if it were smoke. In the gaps, in the crevices, in the stress fractures, the light began to coalesce. First came the wireframes, shimmering blue outlines of the Atlas cradle, a ghostly skeleton appearing within the solid mass. It was a symphony of silent construction, 1,000 architects working in perfect unison. Then, the wireframes began to fill. The light solidified, hardening into the same gleaming, blue-gold metal of the staff. Beams materialized, slotting into place with impossible precision. Massive pistons took shape, their heads pressing against the underside of shattered floor panels. A complex web of girders and trusses formed a lattice of support, a net of pure creation catching the house of cards from within. The entire structure, weighing tens of thousands of tons, had been groaning, shifting, seconds from catastrophic failure. And then, with the final piece of the cradle locking into place, it fell silent. It didn't stop moving with a lurch. It simply stopped. The groans of stressed metal ceased. The dust settled. The terrible, imminent kinetic energy of the collapse had been caught, neutralized, and held in perfect, solid stasis by an object that had not existed 5 seconds earlier. The pillar of light from the staff vanished. The divine hum that had filled the air faded, leaving behind a silence more profound than any before it. On the rooftop, Izuku collapsed. The staff clattered from his nerveless fingers. The world was a smear of gray. He was vaguely aware of the briefcase snapping shut beside him, a pre-programmed command from Nizu to secure the staff if its user was incapacitated. Then nothing. The silence in the collapse zone was broken by a single, choked gasp from a nearby firefighter. All eyes were on the rubble, now interwoven with a beautiful, terrifying lattice of golden metal that glowed with a soft, internal light. It looked like the work of gods. What in God's name? Ryukyu whispered, her dragon form seeming small and mundane in the face of the impossible structure. It's stable. Gang Orca breathed, his sonar sense confirming the reality of what his eyes were seeing. The load is completely supported. It's not moving. It's solid. The spell was broken. Go, go, go! A rescue captain roared. We have a window! Get those people out of there! A wave of relief and adrenaline surged through the rescue teams. They swarmed the stabilized structure, their conventional tools finding purchase, their paths now clear. The news helicopters that had been keeping a respectful distance now swooped in, their cameras zooming in on the miraculous sight. We are witnessing something truly unbelievable here at the site of the Daikoku Tower collapse. A reporter's voice announced, breathless with awe. Just moments ago, what seemed to be an inevitable secondary collapse has been averted by, well, we don't know what to call it. A structure of golden light has appeared, supporting the debris from within. It's a miracle. A true miracle here in Yuzurifu. On the edge of the cordon, Uraraka and Ida stared, their mouths agape. They had seen the pillar of light, had felt the pressure wave. They knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that Deku was responsible. He did it! Uraraka whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. He actually did it. His solution, it was inconceivable. Ida said, his voice stripped of its usual commanding tone, replaced by sheer wonder. But then, a sharp spike of worry cut through his awe. Where is he? We must check on his status. They broke from their posts, pushing their way toward the rooftop they'd last seen him on. They found him crumpled on the concrete, his skin a waxy, translucent white, his lips tinged with blue. He looked like a porcelain doll that had been drained of all color. He wasn't just unconscious. He looked empty. The vibrant, crackling life force that always surrounded Izuku Midoriya was gone. Deku-kun! Uraraka shrieked, falling to her knees beside him. She reached out to touch his face, her hand recoiling at the unnatural coldness of his skin. Ida's mind, trained for crisis, kicked in. He checked for a pulse, his fingers pressing against Izuku's neck. He found one, but it was terrifyingly faint and thready. He's in severe metabolic shock. We need a medic team, now. He yelled into his calm, his voice cracking with panic. As the medics rushed to their friend's side, Uraraka looked from Deku's deathly pale face to the miraculous golden structure in the distance. On the news feeds they were calling him a savior, a miracle worker. But looking at his still, frail form, Uraraka felt a cold dread creep into her heart. This wasn't a victory. It was a transaction. And the price had been terrifyingly high. In the UA Heights Alliance dormitory common room, the atmosphere was tense. Most of the students who hadn't been deployed were gathered around the large television, watching the news unfold. They saw the footage of the Atlas cradle, its divine glow stark against the gray sky. They heard the cheers as the first survivors were brought out, a mother clutching two small children, an elderly couple, a group of office workers, all safe, all alive, thanks to the miracle. Katsuki Bakugo stood apart from the group, leaning against a far wall, his arms crossed. He had been watching in silence, his red eyes fixed on the screen. He saw the impossible structure. He listened to the reporters fawning over the mystery hero who had performed this act of God. He heard the other students murmuring in awe and confusion. That's got to be a new pro hero, right? No one's ever seen a quirk like that. It looks like something Yamamo would make, but on a huge scale. Whoever it is, they're incredible, Bakugo knew. He didn't need confirmation. The sheer, audacious, world-breaking scale of it could only be one person. That damn nerd Deku. A close-up shot appeared on the screen, filmed from a news chopper. It was a blurry image of a small figure in a green hero costume being loaded onto a stretcher, his face unnaturally pale, his friends hovering over him with panicked expressions. The reporter speculated it was a hero injured in the initial collapse. Bakugo knew better. That was the cost. He watched as the saved civilians cried with joy, as the news anchors declared it the most incredible rescue in modern hero history. He saw the awe and the worship on the faces in the crowd, and he felt a cold, hard knot of fury tightening in his gut. They were cheering for a cheat. All his life, he had clawed his way up. He had trained until his bones ached, and his explosions tore his own arms apart. He had pushed, and fought, and bled for every inch of his power. Strength was something you forged in fire. It was something you earned. And Deku, first with a borrowed power he didn't deserve, and now with a magic wand he just found, he was bypassing all of it. He was just clicking his fingers and making reality bend to his will. That golden cage wasn't a symbol of heroism. It was a symbol of a shortcut. An effortless, unearned answer to a problem that real heroes were supposed to struggle and bleed to solve. He looked at his own hands, his palms scarred and calloused from a lifetime of effort. He clenched them into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. The roar of the cheering crowd on the television was a grating, offensive noise. It was the sound of the world celebrating a lie. He didn't see a miracle. He didn't see a savior. He saw the nerd he'd known his whole life, taking the easy way out, once again. And the injustice of it all burned in his chest, a rage more potent and focused than any explosion he could ever hope to create. He pushed himself off the wall and walked out of the room, ignoring the questioning looks from his classmates. The confrontation could wait. But it was coming. In the deepest, most fortified chamber of the Gunga Mountain Villa, the world was a tapestry of ghosts. For the man who called himself All for One, physical senses were a distant, corroded memory. He did not see with eyes or hear with ears. He perceived reality through the thrumming, discordant symphony of 1,000 stolen quirks, a web of psychic energies that spread out from his ruined body, tasting the world in shades of power and potential. His prison of flesh and life support was a static, humming hell. But through his connection to Tamura Shigaraki, he had a window. Through the boy's senses, the world became a vibrant, chaotic mural once more. At this moment, he was experiencing the world through Shigaraki's burgeoning senses, a phantom passenger in the driver's seat of a god in the making. He felt the boy's frustration, the simmering rage at his own incomplete state, the phantom itch of power just beyond his full control. Then, something new happened. It was not a quirk. It was not the familiar, heroic blaze of One for All, a power he knew as intimately as his own hated reflection. This was something else entirely. It was a silent thunderclap in the metaphysical realm, a pressure wave of pure intent that washed over Muzurifu. In the grand tapestry of quirk energies that All for One constantly observed, a new thread had appeared. No, not a thread, but a perfect, geometric whole. It was a scream of creation that registered as absolute silence, a void where a quirk should be, yet it possessed a power that dwarfed everything around it. Shigaraki, miles away in a different hideout, flinched as if from a physical blow. A migraine bloomed behind his eyes, a spike of cold pressure that was not his own. It was his master, his other self, focusing with an intensity that bordered on pain. What was that? All for One wondered, his consciousness surging with a curiosity he hadn't felt in a century. It was a power signature with no biological origin, no genetic marker. It was clean, pure, and terrifyingly fundamental. It felt primordial. He delved into the vast, dusty archives of his own mind, a library of lives lived and knowledge stolen over 200 years. He sifted through memories that predated the age of heroes, memories from the dawn of quirks, when the world was in chaos and humanity was clawing for any explanation, any foothold. He recalled whispers and fragmented texts he had dismissed as fanciful myths, stories from the pre-quirk era that humanity had long since forgotten in its obsession with the new paradigm of superpowers. Legends of artifacts. Tools of the old gods. His memory snagged on a particular file, a dusty corner of his mind. 150 years ago, he'd obliterated a small, esoteric cult. They didn't worship a person or a god, but an object. They spoke of a scepter that could weave reality from will, a tool they called the Forge of Ambrosius. Or, more simply, the Maker's Wand. They claimed it was a remnant of a forgotten science, a power so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. He had taken their leader's minor telekinetic quirk and dismissed their beliefs as the ramblings of fools clinging to a world that no longer existed. But the energy he had just felt, it matched their fervent, mad descriptions. The silent, world-bending intent. The clean, non-biological signature. The realization struck him not as a spark, but as a tectonic plate shifting in the bedrock of his ambition. It was real. The fairy tale was real. And someone had just used it. Through Shigaraki's eyes, he watched the news feeds flicker to life. The footage was grainy at first, a reporter's voice trembling with awe. Then the image sharpened. A structure of impossible, glowing gold, woven into a mountain of rubble, holding back death with serene, geometric perfection. He saw it, and he knew. A wave of pure, undiluted avarice, so potent it made Shigaraki physically shudder, washed through All for One. This was it. This was the final piece, the ultimate tool. His current state was a testament to his limitations. His body was a mangled wreck, a prison of tubes and machines, sustained only by a cocktail of life-extending quirks that warred with each other. His grand prize, one for all, had shattered his vessel. His attempts to steal it back had failed. His Nomu, for all their power, were flawed creations, built from broken human stock, their minds shattered, their power unstable. He was a god chained by the frailties of biology. But the staff of creation, it bypassed biology entirely. His mind, a weapon of terrible intellect, began to race, listing the possibilities with a speed and hunger that was truly monstrous. A new body. Not a repaired one, not a healed one. A perfect one. He could obtain the schematics for a healthy human body, or better, a transhuman one, and simply create it. A vessel immune to disease, to age, to the corrosive backlash of holding too many quirks. A body that one for all could not break. Perfect Nomu. No more need for corpses or deranged volunteers. He could design a creature from the ground up, based on pure, monstrous concept. A being with the strength of gigantomachia, the speed of hawks, and the regenerative abilities of a dozen quirks, all woven from light and will, loyal and flawless from its first moment of existence. Impenetrable fortresses. Why bother with concrete and steel when he could create a stronghold that could reconfigure itself in real time? A fortress that could analyze an opponent's quirk and instantly generate a structure made of an alloy specifically designed to counter it. And the most tantalizing thought of all. He looked at his own scarred, useless hands in his mind's eye. His own quirk, All for One, required him to physically touch his victims. It was a messy, intimate, and increasingly risky limitation. But with the staff? He could design a device. A resonance fork, a synaptic relay, a machine that could replicate the effect of his quirk at a distance, plucking powers from heroes like fruit from a tree, all from the safety of his throne. He would not just be a king of the underworld. He would be a true god. The undisputed creator and master of the new world. The mission had changed. The destruction of hero society, the acquisition of one for all, those were now secondary goals, stepping stones. The new prime directive, the singular obsession that now consumed every iota of his being, was the capture of that staff. And with it, the boy who had just proven he could wield it. Tamira! His voice whispered, a dry rustle of sound that manifested in the back of Shigaraki's skull, a parasitic thought. Did you feel that? Shigaraki was scratching his neck, his own unease amplified by his master's sudden, manic focus. I felt something. It was loud. It made my head hurt. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock we never knew existed. All for one breathed, the sound laced with an ancient, chilling hunger. Our plans have been insufficient. We have been trying to decay a world of stone, one pebble at a time. But the boy, ninth holder of One for All, Izuku Midoriya, has just found a tool that can quarry mountains. He pushed the images, the concepts, the sheer, boundless potential into Shigaraki's mind. He showed him visions of a world where every whim of destruction could be made manifest, not through slow decay, but through instantaneous, terrible creation. The boy must be taken. All for One declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. The staff must be claimed. It is the path to true godhood. For you, my apprentice. And for me. The hunt had begun. 2 days later, the UA Heights Alliance common room was abuzz. The miracle at Muzutafu was the only thing anyone could talk about. Izuku Midoriya walked in, and the lively chatter died instantly. Every eye turned to him. He looked fragile, smaller than usual, swallowed by his gray UA hoodie. His skin had regained some of its color, thanks to 2 solid days of recovery girl's care and force-fed nutritional supplements. But a deep, unshakable exhaustion still clung to him like a shroud. The experience had been a brutal jumpstart on an empty battery. His body was technically healed, but his soul felt overdrawn. Midoriya! Kirishima was the first to break the silence, rushing over with his usual bright energy, though it was tempered with concern. Dude, we saw you on the news. They said you were injured. Are you okay? I'm fine, Kirishima-kun, Izuku said, forcing a weak smile. Just got a little too close to the collapse. I'm alright. It was the official story, flimsy as it was. Misa had locked down all information regarding his involvement. To the world, the Atlas Cradle was a mystery, likely the debut of a new, incredibly powerful and secretive pro-hero. To his classmates, Izuku was just another student who had been caught in the chaos. But those who had been there, Uraraka and Iida, knew better, and those who knew him, they suspected. Uraraka came to his side, her expression soft with a worry that went deeper than his physical health. We were so worried, Deku-kun. You looked really bad. I'm sorry for scaring you, he said, his gaze dropping to the floor. The shame was a heavy, unexpected weight. He had saved 9 people. He should feel proud, but all he could remember was the looks of sheer panic on his friends' faces as they found him, a husk of a person on a dusty rooftop. Your actions were illogical and reckless, but ultimately successful in the preservation of civilian life, Iida stated, adjusting his glasses. His voice was stiff with formality, but his eyes betrayed his relief. As your class representative, I must reprimand you, but as your friend, I am glad you are safe. The other students crowded around, a flurry of questions and concerned comments. Had he seen the golden structure up close? Did he know who the mystery hero was? The attention was suffocating. He felt like an imposter in his own life. He mumbled excuses and started to make his way toward the elevators, desperate for the quiet solitude of his all-night-themed room. He just wanted to lie down, to feel normal again. He was almost to the hallway when a figure blocked his path. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his black track pants. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't smirking. His expression was unnervingly calm, his red eyes holding a cold, simmering fire. The rest of the class seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, their chatter fading once more. Move it, Kaken, Izuku said quietly, too tired for a fight. Bakugo didn't move. He just stared, his gaze sweeping over Izuku, lingering for a moment on his hands, then his face. So, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the silence of the common room. The whole world's talking about a miracle worker. Izuku froze. I don't know what you're talking about, don't you? Bakugo took a step closer, forcing Izuku to take a step back. The space between them crackled with a tension that was decades in the making. An impossible rescue. A power that rewrites the rules. Something for nothing. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Deku? The name was a whip crack. Not the repurposed term of endearment Uraraka used, but the original venomous sneer he'd grown up with. It meant useless. It meant worthless. And right now, it felt like a brand. The 9 people who are alive right now don't think it was nothing, Izuku countered, his voice trembling slightly. He could feel the eyes of his classmates on them. Oh, I'm sure they're real grateful, Bakugo sneered, and the sound was pure acid. He leaned in, lowering his voice so only Izuku could hear him, a conspiratorial and menacing hiss. But you and I both know what it was. It was a cheat. Just another damn cheat code you stumbled into. Izuku flinched as if struck. It's not a cheat. It has a cost. A huge one. He thought of the feeling of being hollowed out, of his life force being siphoned away. It nearly killed me, Bakugo let out a short, sharp, ugly laugh. It was a sound devoid of any humor. A cost? He pulled one hand from his pocket, and tiny, angry explosions began to pop and crackle in his palm, a physical manifestation of his rage. Don't you dare talk to me about cost. I've been paying the cost my whole life. Training until I puke, pushing my quirk until my bones feel like they're gonna shatter from the recoil. Breaking myself over and over to get stronger, to earn my place. He jabbed a finger at Izuku's chest, not quite touching him, but the intent was there. Every hero, every person in this damn school, is fighting that fight. They're bleeding for their power. They're struggling. That's the point. That's what makes it mean something. His voice rose, the quiet menace giving way to raw, unfiltered fury. The rest of the class was backing away, giving them a wide berth. But not you! Bakugo snarled, his face contorted in a mask of rage and something that looked disturbingly like betrayal. First, you get All Might's power handed to you on a silver platter. You didn't work for it, you just cried your way into it. And now this. A magic wand you found in the dirt that lets you play God. You just think of something, and poof, it's there. All those heroes breaking their backs, Ryukyu and Gang Orca, completely useless, because you just waved your little stick and solved the problem with no effort. That's not true! Izuku's voice cracked, tears of frustration and hurt welling in his eyes. It took everything I had. I had to focus, I had to use a blueprint. IT doesn't matter! Bakugo roared, and the force of his voice was a physical blow. The explosions in his palm grew larger, brighter. The blueprint wasn't yours. The power wasn't yours. The struggle wasn't yours. You skipped it all. You skipped the most important part. You think being a hero is about the result? About saving people? That's part of it, you damn nerd, but it's also about the climb. It's about deserving the strength you have. What you did out there, it wasn't heroism. It was a damn parlor trick. He shoved past Izuku, deliberately bumping his shoulder hard. He stopped at the entrance to the hallway and looked back, his eyes burning with an incandescent rage. You stood on a roof, wished for a miracle, and got one. He spat, the words dripping with contempt. Don't you dare pretend that's the same as the people on the ground bleeding for every inch. You didn't earn it. With that final, damning verdict, Bakugo turned and stalked down the hallway, disappearing into the elevator without another word. The doors slid shut, leaving behind a silence that was heavier and more suffocating than any noise. Izuku stood frozen, the echo of Bakugo's words ringing in his ears. You didn't earn it. He had saved 9 people. He knew that. Logically, rationally, he knew he had made the right choice. But Bakugo's words had bypassed logic and struck deep into the heart of his oldest insecurity, the feeling that he was an imposter. The quirkless boy who was playing hero with borrowed powers. He looked down at his hands. His right hand, scarred and gnawed from the struggle to master One for All, the proof of his pain, his effort, his climb. Then he looked at his left hand, the one that had held the staff, the one that had channeled a power that felt clean, effortless, and utterly alien. Bakugo was wrong. He was angry and cruel, and he was wrong. But a small, poisonous voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was also right. He had bypassed the struggle. He had used a tool he'd found by accident to solve a problem that had stumped the best and strongest heroes in the country. He hadn't overcome the obstacle. He had erased it. The pride he should have felt for the rescue was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping shame. The awe of his classmates now felt like the admiration of a crowd for a staged magician who had just performed a particularly clever illusion. He finally moved, his legs feeling like lead, and made his way to his room. He shut the door, cutting himself off from the world. His room, a shrine to All Might, the ultimate symbol of earned strength and heroic struggle, suddenly felt like a courtroom, and all the smiling posters were the jury. He sat on his bed, the springs groaning in protest. He touched his chest, feeling the phantom ache of the stamina drain. It was a real cost, a painful one. But Bakugo had reframed it. It wasn't the honorable exhaustion of a warrior after a hard-fought battle. It was the transactional fatigue of a mage who had spent too much mana. It felt hollow. A seed of doubt, planted by All Might's fear and watered by Bakugo's rage, had just taken root in the fertile soil of his soul. And as he stared at his own reflection in the dark screen of his computer monitor, he had to ask himself the question he had been avoiding for 3 days. Was he still the hero who struggled, who broke himself to save one person? Or was he becoming something else? A god of convenience, a purveyor of miracles, who was slowly forgetting the value of the climb? The answer terrified him, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure.